So here we are going to start a review on scatter plots and two-way tables. For this very first page, it's asking you to find equations. Remember, we are dealing with linear equations, so I'm hoping you remember this by now. Y equals mx plus b, where m is your slope or your rate, and b is your y-intercept or your starting point. Remember, if I'm given for part A two ordered pairs on your formula sheet, if you would forget, you do y minus y over x minus x. Remember, the y's, and this is to find your slope. The y's are your second values, so I would be doing 16 minus 18 over my x values, 2 minus 4. Well, 16 minus 18 is negative 2. 2 minus 4 is also negative 2. And when I divide those, I get a 1. So 1 is my slope. So far, I would have the equation y equals 1x plus b. All I did from my general equation is I substituted 1 in for my slope. Now to find your b, your y-intercept, you can plug in either this ordered pair 216 or this ordered pair 418. It does not matter. So I'm going to plug in the ordered pair 216. So instead of y, my y value was 16. Instead of x, my x value was 2 plus b. Now we're going to use algebra. 1 times 2 was 2, so I'm left with 16 equals 2 plus b. And to get b by itself, the opposite of a positive 2, you are subtracting 2. 16 minus 2 is 14. So 14 is b and 14 is your y-intercept. So overall, your overall equation for part A, I'll write it up here, y equals 1x for your slope plus 14 for your y-intercept. You can double check that to make sure it works. And remember to double check, I would do 1 times 2 is 2 plus 14 does give me 16, so I know I did that correctly. Or 1 times 4 is 4 plus 14 does give me 18. Just a good way to double check on a test especially. This one gives me my slope is 7, so I would have y equals 7x. And it also gives me my y-intercept of 0, negative 10. So it would pass through my y-axis at negative 10. So I would put minus 10 on the end of my equation. For part C, you are going to do something similar. So I would start writing my equation, and it gives me my slope of 3. So I would have y equals 3x plus b. Just like before, to get your b, you have to plug in your ordered pair. So instead of y, I'm going to plug in 10. So I have 10 equals 3. Instead of x, I'll plug in my x value, which was negative 2 plus b. So I would have 10 equals 3 times negative 2 is negative 6 plus b. And to get b by itself, the opposite of subtracting 6 would be adding 6. Those cancel, so I'm left with 16 equals b. So overall, my full equation would be y equals 3x for my slope. Remember, your slope is always glued to your x, plus 16 for my y-intercept. Part D. Student council got a quote from Joe's t-shirt company for Spirit shirts this year. Joe charged an upfront fee of $80 and $4 per shirt. So remember, the per shirt charge is always your rate or your slope. So my total cost, and they want us to use the variable C, is equal to 4n, because they wanted us to use n for the number of shirts. So $4 times our number of shirts plus an $80 upfront fee. And lastly, E is just like part A, so why don't you try to do E on your own? Pause the video, and whenever you're ready to check your answers, please press play. So for this one, you should have had an answer of y equals negative 3x plus 5. I found my slope by doing change in y divided by change in x. So negative 10 minus negative 19 gives me a positive 9. Make sure you do minus your negative. And then 5 minus 8 is negative 3. When I divide, I get a negative 3. Plug in your slope. Plug in an y value, which I did negative 10, and my x value, which was 5. Remember, you could have still plugged in the ordered pair 8, negative 19, and you still should have had a y-intercept or b of a positive 5. That's why I tacked on plus 5 at the end of my equation. So for this data, it's average growth of a properly fed pig. I know you guys learn a lot about pigs on farms. So we are going to make a graph, and it says age, comma, weight. So age goes on your x-axis and weight goes on your y. So I'm going to put age on my x-axis, and I'm going to label to 6, put my scale on, and I have weight on my y-axis, and we have to get the whole way to 273. In my scale on my y-axis, I'm going to have increment by 50s. So it would go 50, if my pen would write for me, 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, and 300. So if I plot my data, actually I would like you to plot your data for me on yours, and then pause the video and press play when you're ready to check it. So you should have something similar to my data points in orange. It's rather tough to graph on this program, but hoping you got roughly the same answer. So the next thing says find your linear equation. Remember, to find your linear equation, before you can do that in a scatter plot, you must draw your trend line through your data. So that's the next step I'm going to do, is draw a straight line that roughly estimates my data. To find your slope, remember your m, you'd pick 2 points and do your rise over your run. So I might choose, let's say, this point right here and this point right here. So if I rise, I'm incrementing by 50, and I'm running, I'm incrementing by 1. So 50 divided by 1 would give me 50. That's my slope or rate. So my equation would be y equals 50x plus my y-intercept, which is right here, and that was at, or on your table, at a positive 3. Now remember, your answer can be a tinge different than what I have, as long as your slope or rate is close to 50 and your y-intercept was close to a positive 3. You're A-OK. So what do the values of M and B tell us in terms of this situation? Well, my slope was 50, and that's how much the weight increases per month. And the 3, which was right here, was the weight of the pig at birth. So basically, roughly, this pig starts off weighing 3 pounds, and then it increases 50 pounds per month. Now we're going to use our equation to estimate the pig's weight at 3.5 and again at 7 months. So I'm going to do 2 separate. So my equation was y equals 50x plus 3. So if I plug in 3.5 for my x, find out your answer, and then you're going to do the same for 7 months. So get those answers and check your work with mine, please. So if you use your equations correctly, you should get roughly 178 and 353. Remember, your answers for these can be different depending on if your equation was different, but we should all be roughly getting the same answers. So this next page I want you to try to do on your own, and you're just labeling no correlation, strong positive, strong negative, weak positive, or weak negative. Please pause the video when you're ready to check your answers. Press play. So you should have had strong positive, weak positive, and no correlation. Remember, no correlation, your plots or data points are all over the place. And stronger, this is stronger than this one because your data points are closer to forming a straight line. Down here you should have weak negative because it's decreasing, weak positive because it's increasing, no correlation because your dots are scattered, strong positive, very strong positive because this is really close to a straight line, and strong negative because it's close to a straight line as well, but decreasing. Alright, so for this one, we want to draw our line of best fit and then pick which equation matches it the best. So if I draw a line through my data roughly, and then I would estimate my y-intercept to be right here, so I know my b or my y-intercept is 0 because it passes through the origin. Knowing that, I could eliminate choice A, B, and E because it's definitely not no correlation. This one has a y-intercept of 1 and a y-intercept of 5, and I know my y-intercept 0. Since my line is increasing, my answer should be C because my slope is positive. D would not work because your slope was negative and your data should have been decreasing. So sometimes you don't even have to find out your exact slope in order to find the correct answer. You could use process of elimination. Down here we are going to do the same thing. So if I draw my line roughly through my data, and like I said, it's kind of hard to do. Roughly here is my y-intercept. So I'm going to say my b is roughly at -4. But I know none of those are my options. A y-intercept of a positive 3.5 definitely won't work. Negative 3.5 y-intercept is very close to -4, so that one could possibly be it. Y-intercept of negative 2.5 is too far away. Negative 3.5, like I said, could possibly be it. No correlation, definitely not, because your data points are not scattered. Now let's pay attention to our slope. Is it increasing or decreasing? I'm hoping you're able to tell that it's decreasing, so your answer should be D. That's the best approximation for that line, given your data choices. So for this one, the first thing we are going to do is, as always, find our totals for our rows and columns. So do that for me now. Find your rows and columns and then pause your video, press play whenever you are ready to check your answer just for the totals. So these are the answers you should have: 447 total men, 88 total women, 435 total House of Representatives, and 100 people in the Senate. And no matter what, if you add up your row or your column, you should get 535. What are the total number of people in Congress? Since this did not ask you to find a percentage, just look for my total number of people, and the total number of people surveyed here was 535. For the next one, this is asking for the percentage of men. So since men was stated first, that goes in your denominator. So my total men was 447. And what percentage of men are senators? So my total number of men that are senators are 83. That would go in my numerator. And remember, then you just find your percentage. You divide and multiply by 100. So you should have had roughly 19% if you rounded to the nearest whole number. Next one, what percentage of men and women in the 112th Congress are women senators? So the percentage of men and women in the 112th Congress, well, that's what this whole table is about. So that's going to be what goes in my denominator, the men and women in the Congress. That would be my denominator, like I said, and that's 535. And how many of them are women senators goes in my numerator. So here's my women column, here's my senators. There are 17 women senators. So that goes in my numerator. As always, divide and multiply by 100. So 17 divided by 535 times 100 gives you roughly 3%. So the next one, what percentage of men and women in the 112th Congress? So men and women in the 112th Congress goes in my denominator, and that was 535. And how many of them are women? So my total women goes in my numerator. Now if I look here, my total women, I have 88. So I would take my 88 and divide it by 535 and multiply it by 100, and you would get roughly 16%. I want you to try this one on your own, and so pause the video. Whenever you're ready to check your answers, please press play. So for your totals, you should have had 75 people use a smartphone, 25 do not, 40 people surveyed were male, 60 were female. So my total, no matter what, should give you 100. What percentage of the total people surveyed were female? So total people surveyed goes in my denominator, and that is 100. How many females were surveyed? If you look at my females, there's 60 of them, and that goes in my numerator. And 60 divided by 100, technically times 100, would give you 60%. And some of you might have realized that off the top of your head, because since it's out of 100, that's your percentage. Because percents are always out of 100. What percentage of males? So males would go in my denominator. So my total males I have here would be 40. And how many of them use a smartphone goes in my numerator. So there are 30 males that use a smartphone. So if I do my 30 divided by 40 and multiply it by 100, I would get 75%. What percentage do not use a smartphone are female? So do not use a smartphone goes in my numerator. So the total people that do not use a smartphone is 25. The number of female people that do not use a smartphone, if you look at our table, do not use a smartphone and are female, are 15. So once again, if I divide 15 divided by 25, multiply it by 100, I would get 60%. How many total people were surveyed? Tells you right there at 100. How many more people use a smartphone than do not use a smartphone? So the people that use a smartphone is 75. The people that do not use a smartphone is 25. So if I want to know how many more people use a smartphone, I'm just going to subtract them. So I would take 75 minus 25, and I would have 50 more people. So 50 more people use the smartphone than do not. So if you look at number 8 and 9, I want you to try to do these on your own, and when you're ready to check your answers, please press play. So for number 8, I can tell, excuse me, that my line of best fit is going to be decreasing. So I know my slope has to be negative. So the only one that has a slope that's negative is A or B. So I can automatically cross off C and D. And the reason now my answer would be B is because the slope of the line of best fit is approximately negative 26.5, which means that for every $1 increase in cost per ticket, the number of tickets sold decreased by 26.5. Remember, slope is always per one item, or per $1 in this case. Here, using a line of best fit, how many points should Denise expect to score after she practices for 3 hours? So your first step is going to draw your line of best fit. So I drew my line of best fit. If I go to 3 hours, which is here, go to when it hits my line, and go over, I'm roughly going to be at 16. Here's question 10 that I'd like you to try on your own. So based on the scatter plot, which statement is true? So read your choices and try to figure it out. And I'm hoping if you did it, you would choose B, because the data shows a positive correlation because my data is increasing from left to right. There you go. Whoops. There you go for our review for this fabulous test. If you have a question, as always, be sure to ask your teacher. And I hope you all have a wonderful day and evening and study hard.